Hello, welcome back to Soma Talks, where we explore the connections between body and mind. In today's episode, we will go deep into the experience of fear, not just as a mental or emotional state, but rather as something that is found in our body. The main question would be, how do we store fear physically? How do we recognize it in our gestures, our movements, our breath? How can movement, body rhythm, even touch become tools for healing? Let's find out. Our today's agenda of this episode would include definition of fear, some examples, and fear's impact on the brain. Then we will delve more into recognizing fear in our body, based on the science introduced by Lowen and Hay. We will explore some ways of releasing fear. How can we cope with fear on a daily basis? And then I will end up with some conclusions that you may find useful. To begin with definitions, let's firstly differentiate between fear and anxiety. Fear is a response to an immediate threat, while anxiety is rather an anticipation of possible threat in the future. What is important is that fear responses, also anxiety responses, aren't just psychological, but they are deeply physiological, preparing us to fight, flee, or freeze. It means that fear has a lot of physical symptoms, which lead to a certain effect. For example, racing heart, sweating, or shaking are one of the most common symptoms, and their effect is to mobilize energy for action. Then we could have also shortness of breath, which leads to heightened body awareness. We can also face muscle tension, some hot or cold flashes, which prepare body for movement. Additionally, mind blanks or even thoughts of death in some extreme situations tend to focus our attention on the perceived fear. So all these examples prove that body has its automatic response to fear, meant to protect us. Another conclusion is that fear isn't just in our mind, but it's also a somatic memory. We learn some behaviors and we automatically respond to fear in the same manner afterwards. Let me share with you one example. In one study, people walked across a virtual plank, sometimes just above the ground, sometimes 80 stories high, and their body movements were tracked. Observers could see the fear just from how they moved, because even subtle changes in hesitation in their posture were seen. And it means that fear isn't just felt, it's expressed in motion, in our movement. We don't just feel fear, but we show it. Others can literally sense fear in how we move, even without our facial expressions. Referring a bit more to neuroscience, one of the neuroscientists, Joseph LeDoux, he suggested that fear isn't a single reaction, but it's two systems. So one responds unconsciously with body reactions, like racing heart and all the other examples that we just mentioned, while another system gives rise to the feeling of fear. These two systems aren't always synchronized. What it means, you can have a full body fear response, like sweating, tension, tight chest, and so on, without even feeling afraid. And that's because these defensive reactions are controlled by subcortical circuits like the amygdala in our brain, which operate below conscious awareness. In fact, fear's impact on brain is much more complex. For example, during high anxiety or panic, blood flow to the brain is decreased, and it leads to impaired thinking and distorted perceptions. Now, let's focus on the fear in our body in general. In order to identify fear in our body, we should start by listening. For example, practicing some somatic exercises, including yoga, trauma-informed breathwork. They all help the body discharge the stored fear without having to think it away. So if you, for example, close your eyes and scan your body, you can always ask, where am I holding tension right now? By this short exercise, you can identify the fear in your body. And actually, there were many scientists who focused on this topic as their main research problem. For example, Alexander Lowen and Louis Hay. Let's start with Lowen. He was a founder of bioenergetic analysis, and he believed that fear is stored in the kidneys and the lower back region of the body. In general, Lowen believed that emotions are embraced by our body, and for example, chronic muscular tension reflects some suppressed emotions. He associated fear with tensions in the legs, pelvis, and lower back, as I said, and people who hold fear, in his opinion, might have a collapsed posture or some weak grounding regarding their feet and legs or shallow breathing. In bioenergetic therapy, fear can manifest as a chronic contraction in the lower body, which disrupts our sense of safety and rootedness. Then we have also Louise Hay, an American motivational author and spiritual teacher, best known for her work in the self-help and metaphysical healing fields. She's often considered a pioneer of the mind-body connection movement, which is very important for Somatalk's concept. Regarding fear, she associated all the emotional issues with specific physical ailments. According to her, fear is stored in the kidneys and bladder, quite similarly to Lowen. Issues in the lower back, in her opinion, also relate to financial fears or lack of support. Her affirmation for releasing fear in this area is, "I trust the process of life. All I need is always taken care of." Since she also worked with affirmations, that's one of her tools suggested for healing from deep fear. As we see, both Lowen and Hay came to quite similar findings, which may suggest that this area of body, meaning lower back and the bottom parts of our body, might be the storage of our fear and anxiety, and these are the areas that we should work with in any somatic exercises to release fear. We can smoothly continue with the next part, how to release fear. Firstly, releasing fear from your body involves working with both your nervous system and your emotional patterns. Fear is deeply somatic emotion, so it's held by our body. It's not just about thinking differently, it's about helping your body feel safe again. There are 3 main approaches that I would like to recommend you: body and nervous system approach, movement approach, and emotional awareness approach. Additionally, you can always use some support of experts like therapists or trauma-informed coaches. But if you want to work with fear on a daily basis, these 3 approaches that I mentioned should be often enough. Firstly, the nervous system. How to regulate the nervous system? This is such an important question nowadays, also in the context of fear. Calm nervous system means reduced fear reactions. Firstly, you can try deep belly breathing. For example, inhaling slowly and exhaling for a bit longer. This activates the vagus nerve and calms the whole nervous system. If you want to know more, the first episode of Somatalks is exactly about conscious breathing, where I also explain you a bit more the nervous system background of breath. Then, it's also good to try vocal toning or humming, which stimulates the vagus nerve as well, which communicates safety signals between brain and body. That's why in many meditations and in yoga we use chanting. Another idea is cold water splashes, just on your face, wrists, or any other part of body that you feel very tense. It can help bring the nervous system back to the present. Another exercise would be just grounding practices, like pressing your feet into the floor or feeling your body weight. This is regulation of the nervous system, so the first approach. The second approach is movement, so body movements. As Lowen said, fear needs movement to leave the body. It's his literal citation. He introduced many bioenergetic exercises for fear, like lying on your back, bending knees, and let your legs shake. Let the body release stored tension in a natural way. It's a bit more complex technique, so if you want to try bioenergetic exercises, it's good to consult it with someone. You can also release deep core muscles by stretching, like gentle stretches or constructive rest pose, so-called, aim to relax your body, especially these deep core muscles. Another idea, emotional awareness, can be a key solution for you. According to Dr. Peter Levine, fear lessens when it is named and felt, not avoided. What we should do is identify fear, name the fear. You can say aloud, I feel fear in my chest, stomach, legs, wherever, and I allow it to be here. Notice the sensation. Where do you feel fear? Where is your body tight? Where do you feel coldness? You can write your fear on paper and burn it. It's more of a symbolic ritual, but it also aims at letting go the fear. In order to enhance your emotional awareness and your resistance to fear, you can also try meditation with some visualization. For example, you can close your eyes and visualize your fear as a very heavy object. Then you imagine yourself setting it down and walking away. This symbolic means that you leave something behind. And it can be surprisingly effective over time. But of course, there are many meditations for fear, especially. You can check them on YouTube or Spotify, and I hope you will find something that works the best for you. Another idea is a bit more cognitive. Instead of, I am afraid and I'll fail, you can always say, this is a chance to learn and grow. So you reframe your narrative. You change your relationship with the fear. That may also work. It's about finding new definitions, redefining what your body already learned. So if your body learned that fear is something wrong and you should be prepared to fight with it, you can always try to redefine fear as a chance to grow, as a signal given by your body. To highlight how this topic is important, we could mention some statistics. For example, 75% of people experience anxiety while public speaking. 10 up to 15% experience a very severe anxiety in this case. Probably public speaking is one of the most common conditions of our fear responses. Another rising aspect is climate anxiety. Some researchers show that 75% of youth, while 7% of adults feel distressed about climate change. And these numbers simply show that fear is a universal experience. Before we move to the conclusions, remember that fear doesn't just live in your mind, but it lives in your tissues, in your breath, in your posture. It simply can be found in your body. That means that your body is also where healing starts. So maybe today you could give your body permission to feel just a little safer using those fear-releasing techniques that we mentioned today. Fear is not your enemy, it's rather your teacher, and your body is your guide. Fear will come, it always does, but will you meet it with resistance or with awareness? The choice is yours. It's not about eliminating fear from your life because that's impossible, but it's more about learning to respond to fear in a way that lets you grow. There is one citation by Dr. Peter Levine that I already mentioned in this episode that we could also translate into our fear-based experiences. He was talking about trauma. He said, "Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathetic witness. Your body is asking you to witness it, so make the best use out of your fear." Before we finish, I want to sum up this episode with two things, one concept and an anecdote. Firstly, the concept is called cognitive triangle, and it shows the interconnection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. The idea is that each part influences the others. In case of fear, this is how it works. Let's start with thoughts. These are the interpretations or beliefs that you have in response to a certain situation. For example, you start thinking something bad is gonna happen, or I really can't handle this. Fear often begins with these kinds of automatic negative thoughts. Moving to the feeling, this is the emotion that you are experiencing. In this case, fear. Feelings, as we said, are influenced by your thoughts. Usually when you think that something is dangerous or you perceive it as uncontrollable, you will probably feel fear. Feelings impact your behaviors. These are the actions that you take in response to fear. For example, you may be avoiding the thing you're afraid of, like freezing or seeking reassurance or escaping the situation. If you change one corner of the triangle, the other two will shift too. If you challenge your thoughts, you would feel less afraid and you will behave more calmly. If you challenge your behavior by, for example, breathing or facing your fear, your thoughts will calm down and your fear will reduce in the end. If you manage your emotions better, thoughts will become clearer and then you will take better actions more aligned with your real values and not just the temporary emotion. I can suggest you reframing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. When it comes to thoughts, you need to challenge what you think. Ask yourself, is it really true? Is this sentence that is appearing in my mind really based in any evidence? Instead of saying, I can't handle this, try saying, this is hard, but I've gotten through such things before, so I'm gonna be fine. This is how you can work with thoughts. Then feelings, you need to name the feeling. For example, say, I'm feeling fear right now. Just label it and you will see that really can lower intensity of the fear. Also, you can use some somatic techniques like deep breathing, grounding. This also regulates emotions. When it comes to behaviors, you need to change your approach. For example, confront instead of avoid. Avoidance actually reinforces fear. Facing fear gradually helps reduce these feelings, so you need to focus on exposure step by step. You can also do something calming or empowering. Really, take small actions that would make you feel more in control, like journaling, talking to someone, or practicing mindfulness and meditation. And now it's the time for the promised anecdote. I asked a psychologist once, where do you think we store fear in our body? And she instantly said, in the head, because fear starts with a thought. And that answer really surprised me, because so often when we feel fear, we think it's just physical, or on the other hand, just emotional. But if you trace it back, it almost always begins with a thought, and it's related with the cognitive triangle that we just mentioned. Fear usually comes as a thought. I'm not ready, something bad will happen, what if I fail? And these thoughts trigger the fear, which triggers tension, which changes how we behave. So that's the cognitive triangle in action. Thoughts, feelings, behaviors, cycling over and over. So here's a tip I want to share with you at the end of this episode. When you feel fear in your body, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what was the thought just before this? Because maybe this thought triggered your emotional reaction. And you can still stop this chain of reactions before starting to act, before the behavior. Once you catch that thought, you found the key. You can challenge it, reframe it. And when you shift the thought, the whole triangle starts to shift with it. Your body softens, your emotions settle, your actions become calmer, more confident. Fear might show up in your body, but as we said, it starts in your mind. That means you have way more power over fear than you think. And that's it for today. I hope you got a bit inspired and you will pay more attention to your fear. Thanks for listening to this episode of Soma Talks. If this sparked any new insights, Let me know on the Instagram page of Somatox, and if you're curious about the science and somatics of emotion, just stay tuned, because this is the beginning. There will be much more episodes about it, because this is what Somatox focuses on. Until next time. Somatox Agatadaras.